The views and opinions expressed on this program are those of the participants and do not reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
BronxNet. Your voice, your views, your vision.
Good evening and welcome to Bronx Talk. Tonight, our subject is parks, Bronx parks. While many have hailed the awarding of the contract for Ferry Point Park, tonight's guest says it's a giveaway. Of late, he's also expressed concern that privately funded parks get better security than our public parks. He's been on the trail of the Yankee Stadium Parks deals, the Croton Filtration Parks deal, and a number of other parks issues. If you'd like to weigh in with your questions or comments, then simply call us at 718-960-7241. You can also email comments to us at bronxtalk@hotmail.com, and we'll read those on the air during a future edition of our program. We've got a lot to talk about with the president of New York City Parks Advocates, Jeffrey Croft. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Let's start off with the Ferry Point golf course. Many in the Bronx have said, wow, thank goodness, we finally have a prospective golf course to be built here, yet you have been quoted in a number of newspapers and saying you don't like the deal. Why don't you like the idea that Donald Trump will be the new vendor for the Ferry Point golf course?
Well, it's not so much that Donald Trump is going to be the new vendor, it's that the city is spending hundreds of millions of dollars to build a luxury golf course when a lot of our parks are falling apart, including the other side of Ferry Point Park, which is what most Bronxites use. And this deal, I mean, the average Bronxite is not going to be able to use this facility because of the cost. And he's allowed to increase the amount the public pays annually. So that's unfortunate. And the public was never supposed to pay for the golf course. That was supposed to be paid for a private developer. So he's getting a complete sweetheart deal. The Bronx people that we've spoken to, which live right in the public housing, they are certainly don't think this is a good use of public resources.
The issue with, I called it a giveaway, and that's what you're suggesting. But don't we want this thing to be done? This has been going on for years and years and years, and there have been a number of different attempts after the toxic materials were found in there. The first idea was a privately funded entity, but that wasn't able to happen. So now they've got a guy who is ready to make it work. Don't we want to see an active professional golf course in that spot instead of what we've had, which is literally nothing?
Absolutely, and that's the rub here, is that the city is already building this. So why are we giving Donald Trump the first 4 years? He's not paying the city a penny, and then after that, the amount that he's paying the city is so small when you compare it to other courses. So it's a great deal for Donald Trump, and it's a poor deal for the city. The city's never going to make its money back there.
But if the city is never going to make its money back, a private developer also wouldn't make his money back, so this is at least a way to get it built. No?
Oh no! Donald Trump is going to be making money hand over foot because he's investing so little, and he's the deal that the Bloomberg administration made makes sure that he only gives the public a very small amount.
You had brought some pictures, and we want to show them. You can explain what the pictures are. So, Jane, let's just put up some of these Ferry Point pictures and give Mr. Croft a chance to explain, what some of his concerns are. All right, so here's the obviously the introduction to it. This is the Ferry Point Park Golf Course.
Right.
Go ahead, keep going there. Now, what is this?
That's just
That's the way it used to be.
well, no, that's actually as of about a month ago, and that's looking towards the Throggs Neck public housing there. On that side of the development, it's all public housing, so those people are never going to be able to utilize that.
Why would they never be able to?
Because
utilize
it's
it?
$125 a round of golf.
So you're
which is-
saying that right across
which is
the
three
street-
times the amount of a regular golf course here.
So what you're saying is the people who live there aren't going to benefit from something right next door.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, the people that are going to be using this are going to be, wealthy people, and again,
How else could this show another picture up there, if you would, folks?
Yeah, that's interesting. That's actually the Ferry Point Park that most people in the Bronx know. And
That may be some of the people who live in that housing project now.
yes, Ferry Point Park is a highly utilized park, and it's one of the worst in New York City. So the
Worst
irony
in what way?
In the lack of maintenance, the lack of facilities. There's no bathroom facilities. It gets routinely flooded, and it's just a mess.
And so this does not help that park, but it builds a golf course there.
Builds a golf course on the other side, yes. And actually, this image is interesting because, again, as part of the 200 million plus development deal, that park is a replacement park, which was taken away by the prior developer. So for almost a decade, that community did not have use of that park. So we've paid $35 million. The taxpayers have paid $35 million to replace that park, which you see in this photograph, and they're building an esplanade. So those two are about $35 million.
Let's go to the next. Now, what is this?
And that's just another green that's being built, and you see the Throggs Neck Bridge in the back.
So you're just getting a sample of that. Won't businesses in the area benefit from having a golf course there and people who come in, and then all of a sudden you have people who are going to go to eat and maybe recreation or spend money from the outside in Bronx neighborhoods? Isn't that something we want?
No, that is something that we want. Unfortunately, that's not quite the reality. I've asked multiple people, besides paying lip service to it, the reality is that people get in their cars, and here are probably luxury vehicles, and they're going to be driving to the golf course, and they're going to be getting right back on that highway. I wish, as a person who grew up in the Bronx, I wish some of that revenue would stay in the Bronx. That would be great. But if you look at the design, there's nothing around there. It's not like there are restaurants and shops. That is being built at the taxpayer's expense, a luxury golf course. And again, Donald Trump is building a $10 million facility to capture all of those revenues, the banquet halls and the restaurant. So that revenue he's going to want to keep.
There as opposed to use in the neighborhood.
Absolutely.
How else would you have done it, given all of the problems that were there, with the toxicity that was found, with the fact that they certainly tried originally to make it a private enterprise? How would you have done this so that we have a productive property there instead of what you don't like right now?
I would build a much smaller facility. The original plan during Robert Moses' days was to actually build a 9-hole golf course, and the majority of that park, the 222 acres, was actually reserved for the public. So you would have had a much smaller course, and you would have had an actual public park.
Let's go to the telephone. I think it's Mark from Pelham Parkway, and I'm guessing, Mark, this is an issue that's important to you because you live in that area. So I figured I'd put you on at this point when we were talking about that. Well, what do you got? How are you, and what's going on?
Well, I don't live exactly in the area, but what I'm starting to see systemically is how Bloomberg has sold the Bronx to the highest bidder. And the perfect example is the Yankee Stadium parks. They didn't do anything with it. And Chris Ward, it's now coming out how he shafted everybody with the filtration plant, and now we did the same thing with the Port Authority, that they raised the tolls to cover. And it's going to fall on Chris Ward, and I think. But my big question is, when they did the filtration plant, they gave $250 million to the Bronx parks, yet they haven't even spent, I think, $60 million of it. And the parks are suffering, and the people of the Bronx are suffering. My only big question is, why are we not banding together and taking them to court on this, and taking the politicians who approved this into court, because I think it's ridiculous. They tell me when I'm
Mark, we got it. We
Bronx has
appreciate the
best
question.
politicians
Now,
money can buy.
there's a lot of different angles. First thing I do want to mention to our viewers, in 2 weeks, I think it's 2 weeks on March 6th, or 3 weeks on March 6th, we're going to have the IBO here, March 5th, thank you, Jane. We're going to have the IBO here, and they're going to lay out all of the finances on the Bronx parks through that filtration deal, so that we'll be able to see what has actually been spent and what hasn't. The accurate numbers, as far as I understand, is something like 140 or 150 million out of the 200 or 240 million, so it wasn't quite the 60. So that's one aspect of it. The second aspect of it, Mr. Croft, you have been working at kind of fighting these things. Why can't some of these things be stopped, or to have greater community input so that there is a little better sensibility for what you would like to see and what apparently Mark would like to see the general public when it comes to these large deals?
Well, that's probably one of our greatest missions, and it's very frustrating because community-based planning and community-based consultation is virtually non-existent in this administration, and unfortunately it's the public that winds up paying. All of these deals, most of these deals are made behind closed doors. So when, for instance, the filtration plant deal, that's an enormous amount of money. We, of course, found out that the filtration plant, could have been built in Westchester for much cheaper. So not only are the taxpayers paying, billions of dollars for a filtration plant that probably shouldn't have been sited there. There are a lot of questions around the parks that were supposed to be so-called improved. Also, the way the deal went down, that was all behind closed doors.
Partially answering Mark's question, what does it take? Like Mark said, well, we have to band together and take them to court. What does it take to, if you or others are concerned about these deals, to actually go to court and establish something different from what's out there?
Well, court, we fight things. Certainly New York City Park Advocates has been involved with lawsuits on various issues, but there has to be a reason to go to a court. There are policies, just bad policies, and unfortunately, a lot of our elected officials. I'm glad that your caller mentioned Yankee Stadium. That was just an outrageous thing. And unfortunately, the Bronx is usually at the short end of the stick when it comes to these deals.
You brought us some pictures of Heritage Field and some of those things, so let's pop those pictures up there and let's talk about Yankee Stadium. Now, when you look at this, you're going to have a hard time convincing a lot of people that this is not a good thing for the Bronx. This is I'm guessing here, this is the original home plate for Yankee Stadium, right?
Actually on the other side, yeah.
On the other side,
yeah,
okay, but at least you're looking at this gorgeous field.
Yep.
Bronx kids and everybody else going to get a chance to play on it. I realize it took a little time, but at this point, why aren't we jumping up and down and shouting and saying, wow, look at this. This is the former Yankee Stadium.
Well, a couple of things. One is that that was supposed to open in 2010, and we're in 2012. Secondly, that's going to be...
given that, we realize there's been immense delays.
Yeah.
So at this point, what's the problem? Go ahead.
Well, again, the problem is that it's not open. At the end of the day, the community had 5 ball fields there, and at the end of the day, they're going to have just those 3, and that's a huge problem. And again, the irony that we're in the shadow of Yankee Stadium, and that the community is losing 2 ball fields. And people forget also is that when they have track and field events, those fields are not going to be available. They're also not going to be available for pickup play. They're just going to be available for permit only.
So for people who reserve them.
You got it.
So in other words, you've got a bunch of friends late on a Sunday evening and in the summer and there's nobody else out there. You want to take a group of people and throw a ball around. Not going to get to do that.
Right. So not only did the community lose a few ball fields, then they're not going to be able to have unfettered access to it. So that's a big issue. So yes, no, absolutely, the fields look great, and hopefully they will be great. But we need more of them. And if you go right across the street, there are parking garages there. People have to remember that the city took 25.3 acres of Bronx parkland, historic Bronx parkland, and they're only replacing less than 22 acres.
Now let's put up a couple of those other pictures. There was an interesting one. Now why was this included in the pictures of the Yankee Stadium parkland? This is a recreation center that is in Highbridge, and it's a nice place. What's the story here?
The story here, and I sent you a list of crimes. Unfortunately, the city, there was a young man was shot there in April, and there have been a number of crimes, very serious crimes, in our Bronx parks. And in 2005, the city was supposed to start tracking crime in parks of 1 acre or greater. And there was a city council hearing a few weeks ago on this. And unfortunately, the NYPD is not complying. And the Bronx, of course, is a borough that is severely affected, unfortunately, by serious crimes sometimes. So that's an unfortunate thing. But the city and the elected officials have to, and the public have to come together to demand accountability, and our parks need to be safe.
If you wanted to, and I'm going back to Mark's question, if you or others, and he used the term we have to band together, wanted to sue the city over these things, what does it take to make that happen? First of all, there has to be a cause of action. On the Yankee stuff, it's sort of a done deal. I believe they're still liable for replacing the 3 acres that are missing, which again, we should be taking down the parking garage. That's only the taxpayers are still paying for this, and they're about to go into default. They need to get rid of that, put in a public park that was there for more than 70 years. So we have opportunities to replace the parkland that was actually seized, and that would be a wonderful thing. Unfortunately, each one of these cases, you have to take these things on a case-by-case basis. What I guess I was getting at is you got to hire a lawyer. Somebody's got to pay for a lawyer.
Sure.
Somebody's got to, and it's got to be a pretty good attorney, because if they're not that good, they're going to go up against the whole battery of city attorneys.
Yes.
So it becomes very difficult to turn these things around or literally do what Mark suggested. Well, we'll take them to court and sue them. You've got to have somebody who can really do this and do it well.
Yankee Stadium was a perfect example of that. I believe the community raised less than $15,000 to handle its state and federal cases, which was, the judge's rulings were so embarrassing. But going into court, there were two. I always remember the scene. There were 2 lawyers for the community, and I think there were 8 or 9 lawyers.
Well, this is what I'm saying. It becomes very difficult to manage something like that, because you're up against. Can you fight City Hall? That's what the question is.
Absolutely, and again, we put out a report, the Broken Promises report, on the Yankee Stadium stuff, and a lot of that is available on our website, nycparkadvocates.org. And then for people who aren't familiar with our new site, which is A Walk in the Park NYC, just Google that.
A Walk in the Park NYC.
If you Google that, a lot of these park issues and a lot of crime issues are on there. And a lot of them are exclusive.
Right near here is Harris Field, which was one of the parks that was supposed to be renovated in the Croton Parks funding.
Yeah.
I drive by there often enough to know that it is still not able to be used. What happened there, and why are we not able to play pickup ball when we can't do it at somewhere else, like we used to do at Harris Field?
We could probably spend a whole hour just talking about the ins and outs of Harris Field, but basically what had happened was that the City of New York, the Parks Department, did not do its due diligence when they went into that project. So a construction company that were in there, they had to stop the project because they found a whole mess of really toxic materials there that the city should have known about. And now the public, again, is on the hook for not only the doubling of the cost to build that park, but also the community has not had access to those fields, and there's still a lot of toxic material on that site.
Do you have a sense of when that park would be available to be used?
We have, that's one of the issues that it's funny, it may wind up in court because there are some toxic issues still there. The artificial turf field that they put in is up and running, but the natural fields, it's a problem.
You brought us some pictures which, just from my eyeball, look like Pelham Bay Park. So I don't know if we can pop some of those pictures up. We'll take a look at the pictures of Pelham Bay Park. Is that what
that was actually
Orchard Beach?
No, that's actually again going back to some of the drainage issues in Ferry Point Park.
Ferry Point
yeah.
Park. Okay,
and you see a road there, and the next part of the road is basically just disintegrated, and so in the summer the fields are at Dust Bowl. And
but if this is now going to be cleaned up,
that's not going to be
this is the Ferry Point
no.
Park that the public uses as opposed to the one that the governor. Let's pop another photo.
Yeah,
these are more of the same.
Yeah.
They have serious drainage problems there.
Serious drainage problems. I mean, that park itself could probably use between $100 and $200 million.
$200 million
just in that park.
To get that up to speed.
Absolutely, and some of the filtration money was going, I believe, to a Ferry Point Park.
There's a very interesting dialogue that has been undertaken through Riverdale over the last 6 or 12 months over a proposal to put a skating rink in an unused area of Van Cortlandt Park right off Broadway. It was passed very recently, rather enthusiastically, by the community board. Many I've spoken to and said, hey, what's bad? We have a skating rink that's coming there, which we've never had before, give people opportunity to skate, and it's in an unused part of the park. It's being handled by a private developer. No public money is being spent. Do you like this deal? Is this something that's worthwhile from your perspective?
Well, first of all, it's outrageous that the Bronx is the only borough in New York City that does not have an ice skating rink.
Maybe now it will. I mean, you got to solve it somehow.
Right. I mean, so I think in the beginning, what a lot of criticism we heard was that the process, how this process was going through, again, that the community didn't have participation in this. I mean, also just to talk about this for a second, it's not an unused part of the park because there are tennis courts and handball courts there, so it is used. So we've certainly heard from those.
Although those tennis courts have been unused for a very long time.
Well, that's again goes back to what we're saying. Just because you abandon a service, which is what the city has done, yes, that's not a reason to put something else there. The public needs to, if something is broken, they need to complain about it, and they need to complain about it loud. It's wonderful that the Bronx is getting a skating rink. We have a few concerns about the pricing, which Monday through Friday it's going to be $5, but Friday on the weekends it's going to be $8 to skate, and then $5 for rental.
That doesn't sound that unreasonable to me,
but it's,
frankly.
8, 9, 10, 11, 12, it adds up, But again, I think it's great that the city is finally getting it. I know there was also some concerns that it was smaller. That was an issue, and I'm just looking at the concessionaire, according to the RFP, the first couple of years are not going to be paying anything to the city, which is always problematic because concessions, by their very nature, the cost is supposed to be borne by the concessionaire.
If they're taking a risk.
Well, that's what
you're asking.
Yeah.
Anyway, before we wrap up, why are all of these things happening? If what you're saying and what you're alleging is true, that these are deals being made outside the public realm and the public is not benefiting from their own public park system, why is this happening?
Again, in this...
and I'm not talking about one or two, we're talking about what seems to be a pretty significant pattern.
And this is all over the city. Basically, the accountability is so little. As we've seen time and time again with this administration, Bloomberg has gone in and he thinks the community represents red tape, opposed to working with the community. So if he can bypass them, which is done with so many projects, the bike lanes, of course, are famous for that. And again, some of these projects, are pretty interesting, and they do benefit. So it is unfortunate that even when projects can benefit, the community is being left out.
And so for you, a little more community input on the front end, and then maybe we'd get better results on the back end.
A lot more.
I want to go to the telephone. Our friend I.C. Levenberg wants to promote the Park Speak Up, which I'm assuming that's something to get us a little more community input. I've moderated that a number of years. So I.C., why don't you give us the details on the upcoming Park Speak Up?
Hi, Gary. Just want to say I love your show, your
Thank
activism,
you.
and I love Jeffrey Croft's photograph.
There.
Occasionally see them in the Times.
Great. So when is the Speak Up?
The 18th annual Bronx Park Speak Up will be Saturday, February 25th at Lehman College Faculty Dining Room from 11 a.m. to 5 p.m.
Okay. And then a lot of these issues and others, people can come up and talk about. They can bring ideas about their own parks and all those kinds of things. That's the place really to have a forum about these things.
All the advocacy topics you mentioned this evening and many more will be covered at this event.
I.C., thank you so much, and we appreciate your joining us and reminding us of that. Is this something that the city pays lip service to, or when Bronxites get together and have dialogue about these issues in a formal way like this? Maybe this is the banding together that our friend Mark was talking about.
Yeah.
Does the city listen to these things?
Unfortunately, for the most part, no. And I've been to the Bronx Speak Up, and a wonderful, wonderful group of people. IC is great, and I mean, amazing energy. But unfortunately, that needs to be converted into real action, and that should be used as a stepping stone. But the public really needs to hold the elected's feet to the fire.
Your email, the website that you have, we put up one, which is NewYorkCityParkAdvocates.org, and you had another one that you wanted people to look at.
Is a walk in the park, NYC.
Jeffrey Croft, thank you for helping bring some things to light. There's clearly enough there to talk about probably for another 5 shows, but we do appreciate you joining us tonight.
Thank you very much.
Folks, if you have further comments or questions on anything you heard on tonight's show or anything going on in the Bronx, then email them to us at bronxtalk@hotmail.com, and we'll read those on the air during a future edition of our program. Archives of the show are available at bronxnet.org. You click Bronx Talk on the right-hand navigation bar. Now, got a lot of good things coming up. Next week, a fun show, not as serious as this one. With the Super Bowl over, it's time for baseball, and we'll talk about the Bronx Museum and an exciting Bronx baseball exhibit. Great show. We hope you'll be with us for that. And then make note, we'll talk about some of these issues with our borough president. He'll be our guest on February 27th. And then on March 5th, as I mentioned earlier, the IBO will be with us to analyze those required payments to improve Bronx parks that have or have not been paid under the Croton filtration deal. So a lot of good stuff coming up. Bronx Talk, of course, Monday nights at 9 here on BronxNet's Cablevision 67, Verizon Fios 33. Thanks to Jane Folloro, our able producer, Michael Arias, our director, our cast of thousands who are running around taking care of all our business here, and to you, good night.